everybody, it's time to continue moving forward. So we're moving further into the 19th century and even you'll see into the beginning of the 20th century. And we'll be taking a look at realism as well as symbolism. An interesting idea is that the different revolutions that we saw under Romanticism continue to realism, even though Romanticism does not. So we have to ask the question here, how is this possible? How do the revolutions continue, even though Romanticism does not? One is the political revolutions, right? Those continue. You'll see all the different years here. It's kind of really amazing that with the French Revolution in Europe, and then the American Revolution on the other side of the globe, that these ideas of democracy start to spread and revolutions continue. But under realism, nationalism begins to develop. And nationalism is patriotism that's run amok, right? With patriotism, there's nothing wrong with flying your country's flag and, being a patriot, singing patriotic songs. But when you take these ideas to an extreme and you believe that your country is the best of all possible countries and that your country is superior to other countries, it's nationalism, and that can lead to bad things happening. And that's the case, you might have noticed with the years here to begin this period that leads us into the First World War. And nationalism was one of the contributing factors for the First World War. Do you remember with Romanticism when we were talking about whether or not it was better to live in the country as opposed to the city, right? Well, it really doesn't matter because the cities win, right? The Industrial Revolution just keeps cranking along. More and more people are moving to the cities. The cities continue to grow. There's new cities that pop up and start to grow. And there are improvements that are being made to rail and steamship travel. So the countries are brought closer together because travel time is decreased. During realism, the middle class continues to grow. Also, there's further decline in power of the upper class and the aristocrats because of the increasing growth and power of the middle class. Now, during this time, real power is money, it's wealth, not your last name, right? And this is an amazing fact here that the population explodes threefold during this time in the 19th century at the beginning of the 20th century. So how do we get to realism from Romanticism if all those different revolutions are continuing? Influential thinker, this is not Santa Claus nor Papa Smurf, this is Karl Marx. He wrote the Communist Manifesto when he was living in London, England. He had been exiled, and Karl Marx was concerned, and he wrote about the gap between the wealthy and the working classes that had happened as a result of industrialization and all of these factory jobs. And Karl Marx wrote and believed and taught that the labor force was responsible for production and was being abused by the factory owners. So a good way to think about this, what Karl Marx taught was that the people on the line in the factory, right, the people who are making the goods, were being shortchanged by the factory owners who were, lowering, keeping their wages as low as possible so that the factory owners can make as much money as possible. Karl Marx taught that capitalism is a corrupt system. And because of Karl Marx and his ideas that he put down in books, labor unions were born. And this led to a restless working class. So we're seeing that the revolutions are continuing, but that idealism that we saw in Romanticism is gone. It's being replaced by realism. Another incredibly influential thinker during this time is Charles Darwin. Wrote his influential book on the origin of species. A lot of people, today look at Charles Darwin as discovering, inventing evolution, right? As not the case. That'd be like saying that, Newton discovered gravity. Gravity had always been there. Evolution's always been here. What Charles Darwin came up with, what he theorized, was natural selection, which you can boil down to that life is a struggle, right? As you might have noticed in your day-to-day goings, life can be kind of a grind. And only the fit survive to pass on their genes. And Charles Darwin, right, stated that the means by which evolution is accomplished is natural selection. A good way to think about the idea of selection is dogs, right? All dogs can interbreed with all other dogs, but how did we get all these different breeds of dogs? And that's through artificial selection. So artificial selection is where people, right, breed animals, not just dogs, but chickens and cats and horses and cows based upon certain traits. So that's how we get all of the different breeds of animals. So with natural selection, this happens on its own in nature, right? And then that's how the genes are passed on. The theories that Charles Darwin proposed in his books were soon confirmed by geologists and then other biologists. Now, at the very bottom of this slide, these theories of survival of the fittest were misapplied by people to society. And that is termed today social Darwinism. Many people during this time said, well, if life is a struggle and only the fit survive to pass on their genes, why should we be helping those who are struggling? Why should we be helping the poor? Because, if they're struggling, right, that means that their genes are not good, so that they're, right? So we shouldn't help them out. We shouldn't really keep them alive. So they pass on their genes and delete the gene pool. It's during this time that there's the Irish potato famine. And interesting fact, the Irish, right, didn't have enough potatoes to eat, partly because they were exporting some of their potato crop to England, right? That's not fair. But the English really didn't care because they didn't like the Irish. They've never liked the Irish. And if they're poor, that means they have bad genes and we really shouldn't help them out. Oh my goodness, these are terrible ideas. Charles Darwin had nothing to do with Charles Darwin. Again, that was people in society took his ideas and misapplied them, right? So we're starting to see that the idealism of the Romanticists is gone. It's being replaced by realism. And we'll continue diving deeper into realism in the next lecture.